Part of the inspiration for the solitary gardens is the fact that I do love to garden and that my house is surrounded by gardens here in the 7th Ward. And the 7th Ward is one of the most violent places in the United States. It's plagued by the violence of poverty, of undereducation, of neglected children. It's plagued by the violence of addiction. It's plagued by the violence of the gunshots that we hear every single day. And the gardens have been this sanctuary, right? This refuge for personal transformation. They have been very therapeutic in a literal sense, and they have provided so much inspiration for the work that I wish to do, because they remind one of life and of transformation, that things don't simply end, they just change shape, right? And that has greatly informed this project. I think some of you might already know my work. I spent 12 years collaborating with this amazing man named Herman Wallace on a project called The House That Herman Built, which was based on his vision of a dream home after wrongfully spending 41 years in solitary confinement. That project really rooted my belief system, my understanding of the world, and my practice in prison abolition. It began with the intention of abolishing solitary, doing anti-solitary work, and then slowly but surely brought me to the point where I realized that prisons are not the solution for so-called crimes in our communities, and that I needed to do whatever I could in this lifetime to not only create awareness around mass incarceration, but to inspire change. I don't know that there is a greater way to honor the life and legacy of Herman Wallace than to continue this work, to be relentless about this work, to continue creating projects that illustrate the cruel and unusual punishment of solitary confinement, and also inspire people to want to engage, to be involved, and to abolish it. So I think we've reached a critical mass in our collective history in terms of how much we can actually torture our populations, particularly the brown and black populations. And I think if we look at the partial abolition of slavery, the introduction of the 13th Amendment, in order to even, consider that amendment, it took massive amounts of slave revolts. It took legislators in the ruling classes. It took educators. It took abolitionists. It took a collective critical mass in order to just tip the scales ever so slightly. And I think it is the responsibility of any engaged citizen, be it an artist or a baker or a lawyer or a politician or whoever you are, to tip the scales and start to decarcerate. Because mass incarceration is destroying our family unit. I see it here every day in the 7th Ward. The kids that I work with in these gardens that surround my home, 9 out of 10 of them have an incarcerated parent. And they are socialized to believe that incarceration is part of their own future, right? They're socialized to believe that incarceration is normal. And it's not like this at any place else I've been to in the world, right? And so this is a critical mass. And this is why we need projects like the solitary gardens, like Herman's house. This is why we need to talk about mass incarceration in our classrooms. This is why we need to talk about it in our yoga classes, in our coffee shops, wherever we are, because we need to not only illustrate what's wrong with the world, but we need to illustrate what is possible. And we need to interject statistics and facts into the psyche of the status quo as much as we need to interject hope and possibility. And I think that this project does all of that. It talks about what is wrong and it talks about solutions, and that's really important. And it invites the general public to be part of the solution making, right? So it eradicates this colonial history where people are told, this is the way we should do things. And it invites people to collectively be part of that conversation, because I do think it is the colonial history that got us to where we are right now, right? This hyper patriarchal experience where we were told, that prisons were the solution to the so-called crimes that affect our communities, and now we see that they're not.